Hey everyone, I'm Victor Dwyer with Piranha. This is the Failures and Wins podcast, where we go with the latest people and we talk about some of the failures and wins they went through in their journey. And then we're also going to go through some team leadership stuff and really what it takes to define and make a real good team and how to be just a good leader in general. We have Amanda on today. Amanda, thank you so much for coming on today. And please give us an intro on how you got started into this.
Yeah, so I'm Amanda Farley. I'm the VP of Growth at Aim Clear, and I've been at Aim Clear for about a year and a half now. And before that, I was a leader at another agency for 11 years. So I've spent some pretty good time learning how to lead in this industry. And I think it's just such a relevant topic with where the industry is headed. We've had a lot of shifts over the last couple of years, and honestly, as being somebody who just switched from leading one team to another team, like I have some really good, I think, insights to share and just some things that have been working for me. So,
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. So what kind of got you started into all this? Like journey wise. Like what made you kind of get into the whole marketing world and kind of get into all that?
oh my goodness, that's like my favorite question to ask people in this industry because there's always like some crazy story because it's never like very rarely is it, oh, I went to school for digital marketing. I actually, yeah, I actually had a PR and a writing background and a psych background. So with that, I got into blog and SEO kind of first and had never taken a class on this stuff, right? So like just went all in. And this was way
Mhm.
back in the OG days of digital. Like I think about the OG days and I remember converting MySpace pages to Facebook pages for businesses and Facebook personal to business and all of those things that have come along the way, right? So
Yeah.
that being said, I really had this like master conquer, like learn the next thing, like the curiosity and hunger that
Mhm.
really has led me to today because not only did that happen within the digital realm but also within business. So I spent a lot of time with growing businesses and just seeing some of their martech challenges, team challenges, and just looking at, okay, how do we, looking at that big picture and figuring out, okay, what do we need to do to make the ultimate like business objectives happen, right? So
Yeah. Yeah. That's great. Cool. Okay. And when it comes down to it, what are some of the failures that you went through kind of going through that journey that you can think of that was a good thing that you learned throughout this process? And how did you navigate it? Is there some weakness that you found in yourself? You're saying, okay, I need to go through this way, or some type of failure that you hit a roadblock that make you go through your journey? Is there
oh
anything
my
there?
gosh. Yes,
Mhm.
absolutely. And I would say even like some of my biggest failures have been within learning how to be a leader, right? Because you get into this and you have that like that drive where all like you do really good at your job, and then all of a sudden you're managing other people. And then, and
Yeah.
I'd never taken like classes on HR and like knowing what's like inbounds, out of bounds, like all that kind of stuff. And um
Hmm.
yeah, wow, like so much, whether it's I think one of the biggest ones though was thinking that everybody thought the way that I did. Like, and I'm thinking like early in the beginning, like it was like, wait, why don't you see it like that? And or or like,
Yeah.
wait, I've realized so much that even in training, like one of the first things I learned within training is that
Mhm.
everyone learns differently, right? Like some people
Yeah.
like to read, some people like to do, some people like to watch videos, some people like to shadow, then do, tinker.
Yeah.
So you kind of have to find this mix in training your teams to figure out what works for them. And even with communication fails, right? Like just because I'm a phone call person doesn't mean that everybody's a phone call person. Like, so you think of
Mhm.
like just some of those missteps in the beginning, like a lot of it was that, like learning that everyone communicates differently, everyone thinks about things differently, like just thought process wise. And
Mhm.
that's also what makes, I think, our work so amazing too in the creative space because you have so many different perspectives. And I think a lot of my success helping lead at Aim Clear over the last year and a half has been the first week I was there, I talked with everyone on the team, and all I did was say, "Hey, how do you like to communicate? Are you like a message, like a Slack message person? Are you an
Mhm.
email person? Do you like project management? Do you want me to just call you?" And it was so funny because the varying results I got, like one of our developers was like, oh my gosh, don't call me, just send me an email with the stuff. If I have questions, I'll reach out. Okay, great.
Mhm.
Flip side, somebody that's in our SEO team, I'm like, hey, how do you like to communicate? Oh my gosh, don't send me an email. It'll overwhelm me. Just call me and then
Yeah.
like message me the details later. So I think it's a good
Yeah.
example of like that little thing, but makes such a big difference, right? A big difference in how you
Yeah.
work together. So
And it really the best way to become a clear communicator is to never assume. Is by never assuming, oh, they already know that. And when you assume things and you assume like, oh yeah, they already know that concept, easy. And that's where the core of miscommunication happens, is you really have to take yourself out of it, because it's so easy for us to ingrain our own perspective in it. And
mm-hmm.
everything is so obvious to us through our own eyes, because we already know the piece of information, we already know the concepts behind it. But you have to take yourself out of that perspective, and then that you have to realize this person might not know any concept related to what you just said. So you have to say, okay, take a step back, realize that, hey, there's other people in the world that don't know the same information that you do, and then be able to describe that in a certain way that it's not necessarily babyfying it, but still making it simpler for that person to understand.
Um, well, and I'll give you a good real life example. In this
Mhm.
industry, we love acronyms, right?
True.
We're always
Yeah.
talking about CAC and CPA and channel. Real life
Mhm.
client asks, "Hey, can I get a report for this campaign we ran spend by channel, just basic numbers?" Yeah, no problem. We can do that.
Mhm.
My business
Yeah.
intelligence data person was like, spend by channel. Do they want
Mhm.
by, because in their business intelligence system, they have it labeled by paid search, paid shopping, paid social display, and that includes a bunch of different things, right? But
Yeah.
in ad channel, we have Google, Facebook, all the different. And he's like, so do you need by like paid, like what paid channel are you asking for? And I was like, oh my gosh.
Mhm.
I'm like, this is exactly the challenge we have in communication in this industry, because we talk about things so synonymously, like, oh yeah, search. Well, search could be Google, search could be Bing, search,
Mhm.
that's a big thing. And we're like, oh yeah, Google ads. That could be
Mhm.
shopping, that could be video, that could be so many different
Yeah.
things. So when it seems so simple on the front end, but if he wouldn't have asked for clarity, he would have went running in a totally different direction than what the client actually needed. And I was like, oh no, he means like by channel. He wants to see like total spend Google, total spend Facebook, total. But it was just
Yeah.
really funny, very very telling, I think, of some of those challenges we have in this space. Like you
What do you think would be the number one communication piece when it comes to communicating with your team? What would you say is the like best way to not get either miscommunications, or just the best way to communicate in general?
well, that's marketing's favorite response. I think it depends on the team that
Yeah.
you're working with and how they like to communicate. Because I've worked with many developers and they want a lot of digital communication, right? They're like totally happy, like very tech focused people in this industry I've noticed are very like, just give me it in writing and we're good. But that's not always the case. Um, on the flip side, I think maybe one of the biggest challenges we have is that people lean too much into that digital communication of email or Slack or GChat or whatever, and they're not taking that time to say, hey, maybe we should call and talk this through, and having that face-to-face communication. So a lot of times if I'm running into a roadblock that's like maybe there's like not clarity or there's a conflict, I'm just gonna
Mhm.
call. I'm just gonna call and like, because then you also hear tone, because sometimes in emails, that's like a whole thing. But I think phone calls are completely underutilized just across the board. And I don't know if it's a generational thing, but
Yeah, I until I got to Piranha, it was so weird to like constantly text people. I'm more of a Slack person, so it was like, and when people said, "Oh yeah, just text them that you'll be able to get them to them faster," it's like, because I always like I'm super like, I don't know what the word is. I'm very diligent about my messages, so I always check my Slack messages like every like 2 minutes. Like if I get a message, it's like a text for me, so I answer it right away. But until I got to Piranha, it wasn't like that. So it's like no, like they might check Slack like once every 2 days. I was like, wow, okay, that's totally different than how I operate. And so you have
yeah,
when you text them, and then it's like, oh yeah, just call them up, and I'm like, what? So I was like, yeah, it's I never. yeah, it was just a crazy. I've never called someone without texting them first saying, "Hey, kid, I call you." I've never
Yeah.
done that before. So,
And honestly, on that, like one of my biggest like things I do with my team that I would recommend anyone to do is tell them what your communication escalation protocol is. Hey, I only check Slack once a day. Like I'm in our project management system maybe twice a day. So it's like if you don't hear from me on those two, email, because email I'm going to be monitoring more frequently because I'm in meetings, right? And I can't have all these things going off while I'm in meetings or working on some deep dive work. And if like it's more urgent than that, text or call me. And I'm very clear, like get on my calendar, even if the calendar looks a little crazy, like this is who to get with on the team. I will find time. I will make sure you get what you need. It's really important because it'd be really easy to look at my calendar and go, oh my gosh, that looks crazy. Right.
yeah,
But my team, like our project managers, like they know how to read the calendars. Oh, this can move and oh, this is for this. And they'll find the time is always there. So it's really just being, hey, making sure you're, raising your hand to get it and we'll definitely get it. Cause if you're just sending messages for like via Slack, for instance, like I've seen this a lot with, hey, I sent Slack messages to so and so and I haven't heard back. And I'm like, well, it looks like they've been in meetings for the last 4 hours or 3 hours or whatever it is. So it's like, hey, I would recommend a text message or a phone call in that case. So I think there's nuances, right, by position and by team. But I think just even opening the dialogue to say, hey, how do you communicate best? What is your escalation protocol? Like that's critical because then at least they know, hey, if this is fire worthy, like something's down, something's broke, they know how to get to you quicker and they understand what the expectations are. Because on the flip side of that, which I know we'll probably talk about, is I think the amount of communication in this industry can cause burnout, mental burnout, because you have to check Slack and email and project management systems and every social channel and all these different things. So you have to have those too, so you can kind of let your team know where it's okay, like to unplug from certain communication channels. And you don't like, there is no expectation they have to respond to Slack in 5 minutes or an hour or 2 hours for that matter, right? So having those open dialogues really can help too with the burnout discussion, I think.
yeah, yeah, and that makes a lot of sense. And when it comes down to communication, what I learned a lot about myself is when it comes to communication through actually respond communication through text, I'm a horrible communicator. Meaning that, like, if you want me to write an email more than 2 sentences, it's gonna look like a sixth grade wrote it. Like, that's really like that's me though. But when it comes to
Yep.
communicating through words and through video, I'm a very effective communicator. So, like, that's why I love Slack, for example. Slack, I can do a lot of voice communication. I can send voice messages. It's very, very
Mm-hmm.
easy for me to do that, and I can do that at scale. But if you want me to say the exact same thing that I said through voice, it's very difficult for me to process it and type it. Like if you said, "Hey Victor, I need you to only type that message," I would have to go, "Okay," I'll be like, "Okay." Like this is what I'm trying to say. But if it's like if I said it like through words, if I said it out loud and then typed, oh, this is easy. Like I can't do it just through text. It's so difficult. It's so difficult. Yeah.
Yeah, but that's such a good point. So the way that you handle your day-to-day communication doing it through voice, I never use voice messages. Like maybe text talk sometimes, but like I never. So this is such a good example of what we're talking about. That's why you have to have
Uh-huh.
these conversations with your team, because if you do that, you guys are going to work so much better together. I'm going to know, oh, he's not going to send me an email. He's going to like, shoot me a voice message, and I can
Yeah.
accommodate and know like, okay, that's how working with you is going to be the best way. Because I'm with you sometimes with like response to text, if it's like not work related, because work related text would mean it's important. I might see it like if it's like personal, I'm like, oh yeah, I'll get back to that, and then like never think about it again until I'm like, oh yeah, I was supposed to text that person back. But the communication piece is huge.
Yeah,
Um
100%. When it comes down to your team, and first of all, building an effective team, and then second thing is managing an effective team. What would you say is the core of building an effective team? Is it finding people that have different styles of communication? How do you connect that sort of communication there? Like what are some ways that you kind of do that to build that effective team?
yeah, so I think from my perspective, I like to surround myself with people that are different, are going to have like that are going to challenge me to see the things I don't see, right? So anytime that we're looking at building effective team, I look for diversity in thinking, and I will look for like how would they get to an answer to a question, right? Not necessarily the answer, like even if there is no right or wrong answer, like how did they arrive at where they did, and what was that like creative thought process. But I
Mhm.
think it's also mindset, because in this business you need to have like a positive and a positive way of thinking, a curiosity, I think, in the industry, because there's like this, I mean, the amount of change, like if you're somebody who doesn't like change, this is probably not the industry for you, like in
Yeah,
general.
marketing, yeah.
Yeah, like probably not the industry. But so you have to have somebody that like thrives in that curiosity and thrives in working with others and bouncing ideas off. And I honestly, I think where I've seen challenges in the team department is when somebody's very stuck in a certain like black and white kind of thinking, because I'm like, this entire industry is gray. Like like forget what
Mhm,
worked 2 days ago. Like there's 8 new things that we now need to consider, and this broke and this happened, and it's
mhm,
just it's this constant state of flux, which also means that like somebody that is really good at communicating and being a self-starter, like I know you always see like back in the day be like, oh, are you a self-starter? But no, like somebody who can self-manage is critical, because there's no roadmap book that's going to be like, oh, hey, check and see if there's any new whatever in the Google system today. It's like you have to be somebody who's kind of keeping an eye, looking ahead, I think, to be successful. So part of building that team is looking for diversity in thinking, positive mindset, curiosity. I think too, just even looking at, uh,
if they enjoy their job, like,
yeah,
yeah.
like you gotta love this. You gotta love
Mhm,
this, and you also have to be really diligent, like about setting. I think bound, and I bring this up because of like the burnout piece, because I do think that like people tend to get burnout in this industry, but it's because their boundaries. You have to be really clear about like your boundary setting. Like if you're out on PTO, take your PTO and set coverage, right? Like be proactive in those things so that you can really have an effective work life balance and all of that. But
and, like, for me, my like, as, like, a leader, my job is basically 2 things. My job is to, A, make sure everyone's communicating, everyone's talking to each other, and then, B, make sure they enjoy their job on a daily basis. If I accomplish those 2 things, the rest will kinda take care of itself. So as long as they are enjoying what their job, they're going to figure out the next Google update. They're gonna be motivated to, like, figure, "Oh, okay, what's happening with this?" As long as I put them in the correct position to succeed, then I'm doing the best I can, when it comes down to that, and that's made it where, it works really well. So, yeah.
yeah, and I think too, part of it is understanding, like, we're far away from the time where people are like, what do you want to do in 5 years? It's more like, what are your passions? What makes you tick? What do you, not just within the work, but outside of the work too? Like, really, this is a people business. Like, at its
Mhm,
very core, yeah, we have a lot of software, a lot of systems, like all that stuff, but we're still a very people focused business. So part of building your team is understanding the people that work within the team as who they are as humans, right? Like what are the things that are going to,
mhm,
get them up in the morning and that they're really striving towards. And sometimes it's, things like, hey, I really want to, speak at PubCon next year. And sometimes it's things like, I really want to take a trip and go to Italy for 3 weeks. Or I
mhm.
had a developer on one of my teams years ago that like wanted to open a taco truck, and that was like his thing,
That's
and it was like
awesome.
awesome. Like, all right, like let's do it. So you have to understand kind of what makes people tick too. I think that's a critical piece. Like
And
it's not all
I
apples to apples.
And to that note, it's important to understand, on even though it's a professional setting, to understand people on a professional level. So, like, I'm a huge believer in professionalism is just a filter of the true person that you are. So, for example, professionalism is going to be like, oh, it's going to be a filtered version, so you're not going to build a strong relationship with that person. It's going to be you're not going to be like this, you're going to be like this. That's the difference between professionalism and being personal. But in my opinion, being personal with your employees builds a stronger relationship with that person that makes it where that bond is stronger, in my opinion. So yes, there is some level of professionalism that you have to keep, yes, but it's still good to be personal and understand them on a personal level, because then you can understand what their motives are. Like if they want to build a taco truck, awesome. Say like, hey, you're gonna have to learn how to sell your taco truck. Like there's gonna be some things, and then you can really understand their motivations. But if you don't care and you're not talking to them, then you're not gonna know any of those things. So you first have to care about them as a person and understand these concepts, and it helps you communicate better at the end of the
Well,
day.
and even this kind of goes on the managing a team long term and why this is important. I worked on a team earlier in my career where everybody was like trying to push for growth. Like there was in the executive team, they were just, well, if you're a designer, don't you want to be an art director? Don't you want to be a creative director? Don't you? And the answer is not everybody does want to do that path. Like, and this particular person, they were like, well, don't you want to move up? And they were like, no, I'm really happy with where I'm at right now. I want to like she wanted to work on her craft, this person I'm talking about, but like wanted to hone in on the craft, and she was very happy. And ultimately, like trying to push somebody to grow faster in a position than they were ready for, they were like, well, I'm just gonna go study my craft somewhere else then. Like that happens. Like, so you really
Mhm.
have to listen to what matters, like whether it's their professional goals and personal, of where are they at in their life or their season, the season they're in right now, and meeting them where they are. Like that's a huge piece, and that's going to evolve over time. If I think about what I back in the OG days of when I started in just the SEO space, like if you would ask me what I want to do then versus like today, like those are so like I'm a different person than I was almost 15 years ago. You know what I mean? Like those are
Mhm.
totally different people. So it's knowing that it's going to evolve over time, I think is critical.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And the hardest positions I've been in, where I want the person, for example, to be a step up, like promote them higher up, and like managing clients and things like that, because I know they'll be good at it, but they don't want to do it, is like the hardest thing for me. Like
As a leader, it's so hard. I agree.
because I have a hole, like with like when I did have my company, there was a hole there. I needed to fill it, and I know exactly who to put there. But she says, "Hey, I don't like this. I don't like this anymore." And then you have to like, then you have to accept it. You have to go through, okay, okay, and then you have to fill it out, and it's difficult. It's a really difficult thing because you want them to be in a certain place, but you know they don't won't enjoy it while they are in that certain place. It makes it really really hard. It's a really hard
So when you
conversation with yourself.
So what you're talking about too is right people, right seats, right? And there's three things that have to happen for somebody to sit in a role. They have to get it. Like, do they get the job? Do they want it? And do they have the capacity? And all of
Yeah.
those three things need to be a yes. And if one of them is a no, then we have a thing to solve, right? Like that's an opportunity to either move, adjust, relook at roles and responsibilities, all that stuff. But you have to have all three of those things, or it doesn't work. And sometimes it is like the want it piece. Like for me, like the first round of my career, like HR, IT, no, thank you. Nope, not for me. I'm good. Like I'm a marketer. I love to lead and guide. I love to train and coach teams, like grow businesses. HR, IT, like not my jam, like just because I could do it doesn't mean I should be the one doing it, but it was totally the want it factor, like
Mhm.
and capacity, but want it was a big one.
Yeah, and question to you. So this came up in my last webinar. How do you have those really hard conversations? That where you might have to communicate something really, like for example, let's say one employee had a miscommunication of what another employee said, and now they're not talking to each other anymore. So how do you handle really hard conversations for both people, and how do you go into that conversation? I'm just really curious about that.
um yeah, that's a good one. And it's this happens, right? This is natural, like just human work environment. Like you're gonna have conflict, and for many number of reasons. And the first thing is when somebody comes to me with this, I try to ask, which this is one of those things where like you learn early, like you can't always just go into fix it. Talk about fails, like me trying to fix it when it was just venting was never good. So I always ask,
Yeah.
Do you want me to fix this and take an action, or are you just venting because you need somebody to brainstorm and talk through it? And a lot of times they just need the vent. They need the vent
Okay.
that helps them kind of come up with the answer. And then sometimes I'll help provide maybe some guidance that says, hey, if this was me, I would recommend maybe having a one-on-one with them, maybe sending them this material. And then, like I'll give them some guidance and let
Yeah.
them decide, like, a lot of times they have the answer themselves if you give them the option to do it. And
Mhm.
then also, if that doesn't resolve, then we go to what's next. Do you want to have a meeting with all of us and we can just talk openly in a safe space? What I try not to do, again, I've been burned hard, is I never go from this conversation with the person that brought me the issue directly to the person that the issue is with without that person involved. Like, I'm not going to go, hey, so and so came to me and this, and this,
Interesting.
because what that's going to do is create more of a toxic environment. So the better option is to work with the person that reported it. And unless it really gets into way HR territory, and then I go to the appropriate resources for that. And that's a totally other thing, right? Like safety in the workplace. But if we're talking about just normal day-to-day, like conflict, usually doing it that way will help resolve it itself. And even, or they'll say, hey, you know what, let me go and I'll talk with the person. They come back and I say, hey, how'd it go? And they're like, it totally worked, or, we did this and things are going well. So there is as a leader, you have to provide that guidance, that space, and then also not like overstep either. Like, it's not always a direct hurry up and fix it ask. And I think that's a mistake a lot of leaders make, because like, those are mistakes I made early, just trying to fix things I didn't know how to fix, and just, yeah, good
That
times.
makes sense. Huh, that's a really good insight. And especially like I've done that in the past where like someone had an issue with the way another person would communicate, and I would say, "Hey, I would probably like fix the way you communicate and say certain things." So, because I worked with a lot of uh, international teams, and a lot of my employees were women, and most of my like management was
Oh
women,
yeah.
and it gets a little interesting when you have Pakistan and you start working with those people.
Oh yeah.
They're not used to their leaders being women, and they never like respected them. And I came in and said, hey, like these are gonna be these are gonna be your management. This is your leaders. It's either if you don't like that, you're welcome to leave. It was that simple, and they ended up staying. So like, and they ended up really respecting them afterward. So because there's a certain way you have to talk to them. So I'm not like, if you talk to them disrespectfully, I'm not going to have that within my company.
Yeah, and
But
that,
it has
I
to be
think that would,
respectful.
yeah, that's like a hard line, right? That's a hard line, and I think you have to draw hard lines where hard lines need to be driven for sure, 100%.
Yeah.
Um, I think the other thing would be if there was like a macro issue, or maybe um there were multiple people that maybe had raised concerns about something.
Hmm.
I would go to that person. I would say, hey, are you open to some feedback? And then I wouldn't make it specific to any one person or any one event. And I would do it that way. Like, but yeah, sometimes with hard lines, like that's hard HR lines. So you gotta draw those too, for
Yeah.
sure.
And going into a little bit about the burnout. And you talked a little bit about the boundaries in there, like the boundaries you have to set. What are going into burnout a little bit? What are you like? What are the best practices not to get burnout? And what are some of the boundaries you set so your employees don't get burnout?
Yeah. So burnout's interesting because burnout isn't just work related, right? Like, burnout happens like many times in any one person's life. Burnout can be being a caretaker, a parent, like the
True.
emotional cycle of burnout can happen in many different ways of life. So part of this industry, I think what's really important to know is that we're high susceptible to burnout because of things like the emails, and like all that stuff is 24 hours a day. The internet does not shut off, right? Like, I always tell when
Mhm.
I'm coaching and I'm talking about this in my teams, I say, I know we're not doing life or death, right? But without the life or death, it's very similar if you go through triage, right? You go through triage. If you're a triage nurse, there's things 24 hours a day happening. There will always be work to do. The work is never done. There's always a new person coming in. Or being a firefighter, like somebody's like, it's always going to be the next one. That is this industry without the life or death. There's always going to be more Slack messages. There's always going to be more tasks. Like the internet does not shut off. So because of that, you have to be super diligent at creating the space that you need. And this looks different for everyone to effectively work. Because it would be really easy. And I've been like totally guilty of doing this myself, to always be thinking about it. If you're always checking your emails, if you're always checking, like you have to unplug, like you have to set yourself space to unplug. And I try to live that and train my team how to do that. And part of it is letting them know when it's safe to do that. Like, yesterday was a good example. I forwarded an email like early this morning, and somebody that's on a different time zone like responded. I said, hey, I go, just so you know, if I send this to you during off hours, unless it's labeled important, don't worry about responding. I'm just forwarding just because I want to make sure you have it in your inbox, and I'm working right now. Because you also have like the dynamics of multiple working times. So you still have to be able to send communication, but you have to have those boundaries, I think, to be able to best communicate, but also know where it's safe. Like it's safe to unplug from Slack, from GChat. You can block your calendar and focus time, and that's okay. And unless it's this level or above, we'll try not to bug you, so you have to kind of create safer space. And even with the like time off, if you're going to be gone for a certain amount of time, like let's put the coverage plan in place. So you're not worried about your ad accounts. You're not worried about your client emails, which is also why client emails, we have like a group email, like alias that we use. That way nobody's left off chains and all that stuff, which is really helpful. But yeah, that's a big piece, because we can be our own worst enemy on that stuff. And I'm the first one to admit I've been that person. And as somebody who's pulled themselves through burnout a couple times, like those are the things sometimes that we do, little things that we do every day that lead us down that path. And it's a lot harder to get out than it is to help prevent going there to begin with.
Yeah, I totally agree. Is there anything else that's been really top of mind that you've been really wanting to talk about, that either you see, hey, a lot of people are doing this and they should be doing that? Is there anything that's been top of mind you've been wanting to communicate lately?
I think the biggest thing is when we talk about where we are today and where we're going is agility. Like you have to build your team to run agile. You have to build your team where they're multi-dimensional players. Like you have to do cross training. You have to, and I know this is kind of the, you definitely don't want to have like the jack of all trades syndrome where everybody's in every seat, but cross training and multi-dimension is critical. Like if you're only doing one piece, not that you have to be accountable to other pieces, but learning about those other pieces is important. One, it'll help you do better at what you're doing, but also when there are shifts within the team is able to cover you. And I've always been a big proponent of, like, I'm not the kind of leader that stands at the top of the hill and being like, oh, you do this and you do that, and I'm not going to do it. Like, especially it does not matter how long I've been in this space and how big the teams have gotten or the clients. You always have to be like, roll your sleeves up, jump in and like dig out of the hole, the latest Google hole, whatever, like figure out the latest problem together. And I have found with doing that helps build trust. And as you build trust within the team and that agility to have each other's backs, and whether that's somebody needs to, like something's down and they need help getting it back up, or something broke, or hey, somebody has a life event and they are not available, like the team coming together to cover that spot and saying, okay, I got this piece, you got this piece, and we make it happen together as a group, not one person, but as a group. That agility and ability to like really work together as a team in high performing times and hard times. Like the first year working, and it's been no secret publicly, with AimClear, we had a lot of shifts. We had a death in leadership, like that happened. We had, like unexpected hospital stays and all of these things, these life things, these big, hard life things as a team happening. And it was like, it would have been easy to fall apart. And we took it as an opportunity to say, you know what, okay, how do we pull in together? and how do we pull each other through. And when different team members were having harder days than others, it's like, okay, like let's shift and cover and communicate with clients and somehow like through all of that. And even, you know, you talk about like just the client side chaos too, of like the ebbs and flows that have been the last 18 months, like how do we work together to move through it? Honest, open communication, having each other's back, building that like bridge of trust. Like that's what's carried us through. Like, and that's like at the end of the day, like nobody quit. Nobody like all of our performance was better than ever, winning awards, like and in the middle of a lot of life craziness. I think we lost Victor, y'all. We'll give a minute. It just stopped.
I am here. My power went out. All of a sudden, everything went completely black. So I am here calling on my phone with mobile connection because my power just went off and right back on. So no idea what happened, but here I am. Cool. So I caught like midway through that. So I got like you were at the death part, then that's really all I got. So I'd love to hear the rest.
Yeah, so I was just saying that, you know, there was a lot of life changes, a lot of life like unknowns that had happened on the top of 18 months still post-COVID pandemic, you know, client shifts. And really it was the ability for the team to pull together and have that like trust and camaraderie and like to pull through. And honestly, we're stronger than ever for it. And just this, and I think that's the reality of it. Like we're always going to have curveballs, whether that's within the work, in the channels, from, you know, the client side, from life. Like the life side is a real thing. The internet goes out. You just, you know, you have this webinar plan and all the, you know, the internet goes out. So it's really how we maneuver and communicate and work through those things. Like that's how you, like, that's the next wave. And if you're only looking at your team as their job function, you're going to lose in this new world. Like you just are. Like it's so much bigger than that. And if you build that good team camaraderie, that trust and communication, like it's just going to carry you. It's going to totally carry you through.
Especially with the labor shortage, like the number one factor, anyone can pay higher. You have like all these things that are going on, like, and the reason why people stay at teams is because people stay at teams and things like that. It's a factor. And what my question to you is, how do you build that team strength? How do you make it where they're effectively like team bonding in a way? How do you make it where they work, where you build that connection with them more than just work, is my question to you.
I think it's 1,000 little things, right? Like I don't think it's one big thing. I think it's 1,000 little things. It's, you know, yes, you got to have check-ins with your team, right? But making sure you're also hearing the not work things about them and asking about those things and not just asking, but like legitimately caring, like, oh, wow, you're you know, you're buying a house or whatever's going on in their life, like generally caring about that. Like that's a piece, but it's also things like when they get stuck or they're, you know, having trouble with something, or like providing that safe space for them to like come and say, hey, I don't really have this figured out, or I thought I had it, but like that was a big thing too in the beginning. Like I've learned to ask, because sometimes you'll like say, hey, can you do this thing? And they're like, yeah, no problem, I got it. And then like they leave and they go to do it, and then they're like, they don't got it. And it's like, hey, if you, I always tell people like, hey, if you get into the work and you think you have it right now and you don't have it then, please tell me so I can help you make sure that you have it. Like that's my job to do that for you. So but it's all those little things. It's knowing when they need space to be flexible because of family. It's knowing when they need space. Like maybe they just, you know, like they're not on their A game, right, for the day, and they just need space. And they're like, hey, I just want to like focus in. Can you cover a couple of my meetings? You're like, yeah, no problem. I got your back. And you know what happens when you do that effectively? they have your back when that's you, right? Like even as the leader, like this happened to me yesterday. I had a meeting and I thought it was supposed to be like a one-on-one meeting. And then I got the updated invite. There was like 8 people on the call. And I was like, oh my gosh, like I can't go into this by myself. And so I like messaged the team and I was like, hey, can you see if like 1 or 2 people are available? I got on this call and there was like 5 of my teammates on, and I was like, dang, I was like, we just come in hard swinging. Like it was just like, that is the like, it was so
That's
awesome.
awesome.
It made me feel like just amazing. But that's just such a big part. I think a big part of it. And knowing,
I totally agree.
Go
ahead.
Perfection. Oh, sorry. Perfection isn't going to exist either. I think that's really important. Like as a leader, like we're learning, evolving, and making mistakes all the time. And I try to even let the team know that, like, hey, I've tried it this way before and that works, but maybe that would work for you. Maybe it won't. Like I try to, again, even with that, say, hey, you know, I'm going out on a limb and I'm trying something new, or like there could be other ways to do this. And just being honest, I think vulnerable that like you're not going to always have all the answers.
Yeah, 100% agree. And is there anything else that you wanted to make sure that you wanted to communicate that's been important to you, top of mind that you can think of? Anything else that you wanted to make sure to communicate there today?
I think just making sure you're investing in your people, your good people. Like it's so easy in marketing to get caught up in the swirl of Q4 and internal needs and client needs, and like the most important thing is investing in your people and making sure that, because that's really what makes the biggest difference in the day-to-day. Like there's always going to be a new swirl problem to solve, and it's so easy to get sucked into it. And it's like you really have to make the time to do that consistently. And I think that's where a lot of leaders miss it sometimes. And yeah, so that would be my big thing.
Cool. That's awesome. Well, Amanda, thank you for joining so much today. That's all we have time for today. Unfortunately, my power did go out, so that was a little bit interesting, make it a little spice it up, you know, sometimes. But yes, thank you so much for joining. Please tell them how to find you, how to find AimClear. Please tell them how to find you.
Yeah, absolutely. So you can find me on Twitter at afree or LinkedIn, Amanda Farley, and also aimclear.com. Everything's there. We also have a nice spicy blog. So if you ever want to see some rants about the industry, things like that, we usually have some pretty good stuff there. And also our team and I am regularly on the conference circuit and at other events. So always feel free to come and say hi if you see me around.
Cool. Thank you so much for joining today. It was great. Thank you, guys. Thank you, everyone, for watching. Thank you, Aim. Thank you, Amanda. Thank you for joining.